Welcome back. Abortion is one of the issues we expect to be front and center on the debate stage next week. It's an issue the Harris campaign is eager to focus on, kicking off an abortion rights-focused bus tour earlier this week in former President Trump's home state of Florida, highlighting Amendment 4 on the state's ballot. That, of course, would overturn the state's current 6-week abortion ban. Former Florida Democratic Congresswoman and current Senate candidate Debbie Murcasel-Powell was part of that bus tour kickoff. Earlier, I spoke to her about the bus tour and what the issue of abortion might mean for her Senate race.
I was grateful that the vice president decided to launch the reproductive bus tour here in the state of Florida. In West Palm Beach, we had a lot of people at that rally. The energy on the ground is electrifying. And the reality is that we are now living under the most extreme ban on abortion here in the state of Florida. On May 1st, women woke up to one of the most draconian laws, a 6-week ban with hardly any exceptions to rape and incest, a ban that is threatening the lives of many women. We heard yesterday from Anya Cook, someone that was turned away. She did not receive the health care that she needed when her pregnancy was not developing in the right way. She went home the next morning. She had a miscarriage, lost half of her blood, and almost lost her reproductive organs. This is the reality for tens of thousands of women living in the state. Rick Scott has said that he proudly supports the 6-week ban. And if you want to understand how extreme Rick Scott is, there was a video that was just released today where he was speaking to students at the University of Miami, spreading disinformation, very disturbing video of how extreme he is supporting a 6-week ban. And if he gets back to the Senate, he is going to push for a national abortion ban. And that is why this race is more important than ever.
And of course, former President Trump insists he will not push for a national abortion ban. In fact, I interviewed his running mate, J.D. Vance, who said that he believes Trump would actually veto a national abortion ban. Trump isn't even going that far, notably. And I do want to follow up with you on that point, because polling right now in Florida, quite frankly, shows there are likely individuals out here who are going to be voting yes on the amendment to overturn the state's 6-week abortion ban, while also voting for Donald Trump and for Rick Scott. How do you win over that voter, Congresswoman?
Well, one of the things that we've been doing from the very beginning in this campaign is bringing independents, Republicans, Democrats into the fold. People here know Rick Scott. He's been in government for 14 years, but they also know that they don't want to vote for Rick Scott. The more they get to know the option that we have in November, the more they understand that there is a better choice for someone that's going to champion their issues in Washington, D.C. And look, I just met 2 students at Gainesville where we had that, it was game day. It was UF versus UM. And I met 2 students that were very conservative, 2 Republican students. For them, their top issue was abortion. And so they will vote for me in this race. And that's what I'm hearing everywhere I go. And let's remember, Amendment 4 needs 60% of the vote. I only need 50 plus 1. And the reality is that even if we enshrine into the state constitution the right for a woman to make that choice with her healthcare provider, if Rick Scott gets reelected, he gets back into the Senate. He wants to be Senate Majority Leader, and he is very much aligned with Project 2025. We can't trust what Donald Trump says, or especially what J.D. Vance is saying about this. Rick Scott will push for a national abortion ban, and we are in this mess to begin with because Donald Trump appointed Supreme Court justices that overturned Roe v. Wade, and that is the reality. And that's why we can't trust what Donald Trump is saying, what J.D. Vance is saying, and we need to trust women in making that decision on their own.
I want to ask you big picture about Vice President Harris's campaign. She has been pressed on some of her shifting stances from 2019 as compared to now on things like Medicare for all, decriminalizing the border, banning fracking. Those are things she and her campaign say she no longer supports. She said in a recent interview that her values have not changed. Do you think that answer is good enough for Florida voters?
Look, I have to be honest with you. From the beginning in this campaign, I have told Floridians across the state, I am running to be your United States Senator, separate of what happens at the top of the ticket, separate of who wins the race in the White House. Now, Vice President Kamala Harris has been very much aligned with the values of Floridians in protecting reproductive freedom, in focusing on lowering the cost of living. We have an affordability crisis here in the state of Florida. The property insurance rates has skyrocketed. Rick Scott, when he was governor, caused the mess that we are in right now. There are things that we can do in the Senate to lower property insurance rates. Those are the issues that I focus on when I'm here in the state of Florida. And those are the issues that I hope that the vice president, once she gets to the White House, will support. And from what I have heard, she is very much aligned with those issues.
And I hear in part of your answer an acknowledgement of the political reality in Florida, which is that this is obviously Trump country, largely. He won Florida in the past two election cycles. Do you think you can win Florida if Kamala Harris doesn't?
Well, first of all, I'm going to push back a little bit on that. So Trump won by 3 points in 2020. We have a huge portion of our electorate, which are independent voters, and we have been winning every single special election. We won one in Orlando because independent voters are also coming out to vote for Democrats, and we have moderate Republicans showing up to vote for us as well.
But you think Kamala Harris has a shot in Florida, Congresswoman?
Oh, if the investments come, I assure you, and if you come down to Florida and you travel with me, you will see what I'm talking about. We have about 20% of the Republicans that are living in the state of Florida are moderate Republicans that did not vote for Donald Trump in the Republican primary. And many of them have been organizing to support Amendment 4. Many of them will not vote for Donald Trump. But look, it's going to be a competitive race in Florida. It's going to be competitive all across the country. But we also know that if you don't invest in voter turnout, in voter registration, if you don't communicate with voters on the values that are important to them and who is going to fight for them, obviously, we are not going to get those voters out. Now, I'm doing that in the campaign, and I think that the vice president has already invested in different field offices, and they're expanding the ground game here in Florida. You
take me to my next and last question. After the 2020 election, you were quite critical of Democrats, basically saying that they failed to do enough to reach out to Latino voters. You said the party, quote, thinks racial identity is how we vote. Is that still how you feel? Has that problem been fixed?
Well, you know, I laugh because I think that there's still a huge gap on trying to do the right thing to reach Latino voters where they're at. And Latinos are very diverse, as you know. Latinos living in South Florida are different from the Latinos living in the central part of the state. There are Puerto Ricans that care about different things that are happening in the island of Puerto Rico at the time, and also the affordability crisis. But also for South Florida, there's so many people that have been forced to leave their home countries because of these dictatorships. And so foreign policy is incredibly important. We need to make sure that we're talking to Latino communities where they're at and understand their diversity. I've been in front of our communities speaking in Spanish because it comes naturally to me. That was my first language. I was born in Ecuador. That's the type of work that we need to do to be in front of these communities. And what I say, Kristen, if Democrats care about the Latino vote, then you are investing in my race here in Florida. I am the only Latina, the first Latina to be at the top of the ticket here in the state of Florida. And believe me when I tell you, the voice that I bring to Washington will be the first voice in dealing with a lot of the issues that we're facing across, not just here in the United States, but also across the hemisphere.
All right. Congresswoman Debbie Murcasel-Powell, thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.